Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Hello.
Today, we are looking at a stack of sources that, well, they tell a story about science and secrets and a hidden heritage that might just completely reframe how you think about the modern mind.
It really is. We're looking at a historical cold case that's been hiding in plain sight for, what, over 100 years now?
Exactly. So what we have here is a slide deck and some really dense research from a book by David Bakan.
Right. It's called Sigmund Freud and the Jewish Mystical Tradition. And the central argument here is it's massive.
It really is. It challenges the entire standard history of science.
Yeah, that clean, straight-line story we all learn, where one discovery just politely leads to the next.
Copernicus to Kepler to Newton, that sort of thing.
Exactly. But the sources we have today argue that one of the biggest pillars of the 20th century psychoanalysis didn't evolve that way at all. It wasn't a discovery.
It was a translation.
And that one word, that distinction, it changes everything.
Because if Freud wasn't just inventing a new science from scratch, but translating an ancient tradition.
Then you have to ask, what was he translating? And maybe more importantly, why did he have to hide it?
Let's start with the visual that really kicks this whole thing off. It's in the slide deck, titled The Problem of Origins.
And it's a graph that just lays out the whole mystery perfectly.
You see these timelines for astronomy and biology, and they're these smooth, gradual curves.
Right, you can see the breadcrumbs. Copernicus hands the baton to Kepler, Kepler to Newton, Lamarck to Darwin. It's a clear lineage. It builds over centuries.
But then you look at the line on this graph for psychoanalysis.
It's completely different.
It's just flat. I mean, basically zero activity. And then suddenly, boom, around 1900, there's this massive, jagged red spike that shoots straight up.
It looks like a heartbeat monitor during a panic attack.
It really does. It implies that this whole complex system of dream interpretation and the talking cure just appeared out of thin air.
And the slide actually quotes Freud himself. He says, everything new must have roots in what was before, which is the problem.
Because where are his roots?
If you look at the history of strictly scientific psychology in the 19th century, they just aren't there. There's no clear path from, measuring skulls to analyzing the Oedipus complex.
Which brings us to the man himself. Because the sources argue the mystery isn't just about the science, it's about the scientists.
The problem of origins personalized. The slide deck calls it the tale of two Freuds.
And it highlights this huge contradiction in his own life story.
On the one hand, you have Phase I Freud. This is the guy that history kind of skims over.
The hard-nosed, materialist neurologist.
Totally. The slide lists his credentials. Disciple of Brooke, expert on aphasia, cocaine researcher.
I mean, this is a guy who spent years in a lab dissecting eels just to find their testes. He was obsessed with physical nerve fibers.
A complete reductionist. For him, every thought, every feeling had to be reducible to chemistry and biology. If you couldn't touch it or measure it, it wasn't real. That was Phase I.
But then there's Phase II, the psychologist.
The Freud we all know.
The man who suddenly decides that the key to curing mental illness isn't in nerve fibers, but in interpreting dreams, slips of the tongue, and digging into mythology.
And the source uses this fantastic phrase for it, a compulsory deflection.
A compulsory deflection. It's such a violent pivot, isn't it?
It is. How does a man obsessed with the physical brain suddenly become the explorer of the invisible soul? That jump, that's the missing link.
And the slide deck walks us through the usual explanations people give, and then just knocks them down one by one.
Yeah, there's a great slide with 3 file folders, each one stamped dismissed.
The first one is the genius theory.
Right. The lazy historian's way out. Oh, he was just a genius. He saw what no one else could.
But Freud himself hated that explanation.
He did. He felt calling someone a genius was just a way of giving up on actually explaining them.
So the next folder to be dismissed is the flash theory.
The idea that he had some kind of sudden mystical vision, a tablet from the sky.
Which would have ruined him.
Completely. Freud was desperate to be seen as a scientist. He insisted his work was all rigorous observation, not some lightning bolt from the gods.
And the last one is the madness theory, that his ideas were just his own neuroses projected onto the world.
Which is an ad hominem attack, right. It might explain some of his quirks, but it doesn't explain why the system itself works or where that system even came from.
So if it wasn't genius, it wasn't a vision, and it wasn't madness, where did psychoanalysis come from?
And this is where the story gets really interesting and a little dark.
We have to look at the context. The next section of the deck is titled The Atmosphere of Hate, and the visuals here are They're heavy. We're in Vienna, late 19th century.
You absolutely cannot understand Freud without understanding the pressure cooker that was Vienna in the 1880s and 90s.
The slide shows these old newspaper headlines in that jagged Gothic script. You see words like blood and Juden Jews.
And it specifically mentions the Titze Esler affair of 1882.
What's that?
It was a blood libel trial, a medieval accusation that Jews were murdering Christian children for their blood, but this was happening in the modern Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was a huge sensation.
And there's a picture here of Karl Lueger, the mayor of Vienna.
Lueger was a game changer in the worst possible way. He was maybe the first modern politician to realize you could use anti-Semitism as a mass political weapon to win elections.
And Freud is living in this city. He's seeing all this. He knows he's an outsider.
He knows, so this gives us the motive. If you're Freud and you have these revolutionary insights, but you know that anything that looks even remotely Jewish or mystical will be laughed out of the room, or worse.
What do?
You hide it. Or, more specifically, you camouflage it.
The next slide explains this strategy. It references the philosopher Leo Strauss and his idea of the logic of persecution.
And the visual's great. It looks like a redacted government document with these black bars over text, and all you can read is, hide, source, to save science.
So what's the logic?
Strauss argued that when a writer lives under persecution, they have to write between the lines. They mask their unorthodox views within orthodox packaging.
So Freud's unorthodox views were these deep spiritual insights.
Right. But to save them, to make sure they survived in a hostile scientific world, he had to dress them in the uniform of secular biology.
He had to make it all look like medicine.
Exactly. He stripped away the theological shell, the mysticism, the religious language, and he replaced it with cold, clinical Latin terminology, libido, ego, Ada.
And the slide deck shows exactly how he did this with his own mentors. There's a slide called Screen Memories of Origins.
It's fascinating. You see portraits of his mentors, people like Breuer and Charcot, but with these big red X's over them.
They often credited them for his big ideas, right?
He did. He said Breuer invented the talking cure and Charcot inspired his sexual theories, but the historical record, it doesn't quite back that up.
So what really happened?
Breuer didn't invent the talking cure. His patient, the famous Anna O, basically did. And Charcot. He flat out denied the sexual theories Freud proposed.
So the source is arguing that Freud was using them as shields.
Yes. He projected his own discoveries onto these respectable Gentile mentors to get scientific cover. If he says, the great Charcot inspired this, it sounds like science. If he says, I found this by looking into my own soul, it sounds like something else.
He was laundering his ideas through them.
A perfect way to put it.
Okay, so we have the motive, survival. We have the method, disguise. Now, the big reveal. What was he actually hiding?
The next slide is the mystery solved, the mystical hypothesis. This is David Bakan's central thesis.
And the visual is a funnel. At the top, you have Jewish mystical tradition. It specifies Kabbala and Chassidism.
That tradition pours into a filter labeled Secularization, the scientific map.
And what comes out at the bottom?
Psychoanalysis.
So Bakan isn't saying Freud was lighting candles and practicing magic.
Not at all. He's arguing that Freud took the map of the human soul that he found in Jewish mysticism and simply translated it into the language of modern science.
He didn't discover the unconscious. He inherited the map for it.
That's the core idea.
Now, I can hear the objection already, and the slide deck anticipates it. Transmission by osmosis. Did Freud actually study these secret scrolls?
Because he always claimed to be a secular, godless Jew.
Right.
And he wasn't sitting in a religious school studying the Zohar. But the slide shows a map of Europe, and there's this cloud drifting from Galicia to Vienna.
His parents were from Galicia.
Exactly. And that region was the heartland of Chassidism, a very mystical, very emotional Jewish revival movement.
So the idea is that this way of thinking was just in the air.
It was in the air. It's in the jokes, the proverbs, the whole worldview. The slide calls it cultural DNA.
And it mentions the B'nai B'rith Lodge.
Don't forget that. He was a member of this Jewish service organization, and they were the very first enthusiastic audience for his dream interpretation theories. He felt comfortable there. He was, culturally speaking, talking to people who already got the language.
Okay, so let's get into the evidence. The slide deck presents 3 exhibits that map the parallels. And this is where the theory goes from, interesting to really convincing.
Let's do it.
Exhibit A, techniques of interpretation. On one side of the slide, we have a page from the Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah.
And on the other, a page from Freud's notes on a dream. The visual parallel is striking.
But the conceptual parallel is the real point here.
It is. Think about how a Kabbalist reads a text like the Torah. They don't just read the surface story. They believe the surface is a shell, a garment.
And the real truth is hidden underneath.
To get to that truth, you have to decode it. You use wordplay, you swap letters, you look for numerical values, you make these wild associations, you treat the text as a code.
And the slide says Freud does the exact same thing with dreams.
It's the identical method. For Freud, the dream you remember, the manifest content, that's just the shell. To get to the real wish, the latent content, you have to decode all the puns, the symbols, the slips of the tongue.
He took a method for reading God's book and applied it to reading the human mind.
A perfect summary. He just changed the target.
Wow. Okay, what about Exhibit B, sexuality and the spirit?
This is where Freud broke most violently with his Victorian peers. For Victorian science, sex was, well, it was biological for reproduction. Or it was a vice. It was just functional.
But the slide shows the Kabbalistic tree of life diagram overlaid on a drawing of the human nervous system.
Because the Zohar is, frankly, shockingly sexual. It sees the entire cosmos as a union of male and female principles. Sexual union on Earth is a mirror of a divine cosmic process. It's the engine of the universe.
And the text on the slide says, the transfer.
Yeah.
Freud stripped the divine from this union, leaving only the drive, libido.
That's it. He takes this cosmic, spiritual energy that the mystics wrote about, and he secularizes it. He calls it libido. He makes sexuality the central engine of the individual soul, just as the Kabbalists made it the central engine of the cosmos.
He keeps the structure but changes the labels to make them sound scientific.
Precisely.
Then there's Exhibit C, the devil is the unconscious. This one is visually dark. It's an old etching of a pit, maybe a hellscape.
In Kabbala, there's a concept of the Sitra Achra, the other side. It's the realm of chaos, of evil, of the demonic.
So in the medieval worldview, a dark urge was a demon from the other side whispering in your ear. It was external.
Right. And what Freud does is he internalizes it.
He turns the demon into the id.
Exactly. It's no longer an external spirit. It's a repressed part of your own mind. But the function is the same. It's the source of chaos and desire that opposes your rational self. You don't call an exorcist anymore.
You call a psychoanalyst.
And the slide includes Freud's own motto for the interpretation of dreams. It's from the Any.
If I cannot bend the higher powers, I will move the infernal regions.
I mean, what a quote. He is explicitly identifying his work with a descent into the underworld. He knew he was playing in the dark.
That leads perfectly into the next major concept in the deck, and this is the part that really blew my mind. It's titled the Sabbatian Archetype.
The visual is a broken crown.
And it mentions a name I had never heard before, Sabbatai Zevi.
Sabbatai Zevi is this crucial and very controversial figure in Jewish history from the 17th century. He claimed to be the Messiah. Thousands upon thousands followed him.
But then he converted to Islam under threat of death from the Sultan.
Which should have been the end of it, right? A failed Messiah.
You'd think.
But his most radical followers came up with a theology to explain it. They called it redemption through sin.
Redemption through sin. That sounds like a complete paradox.
It is. They argued that to save the world, the Messiah had to fall. He had to descend into the lowest depths, into the abyss of impurity, to retrieve the sparks of holiness that were trapped there. He had to become a sinner to save the sinners.
And the slide connects this directly to Freud, a Freudian parallel.
Think about the mechanism of psychoanalysis. How do you cure a patient? You don't tell them to be good. You don't tell them to just think positive thoughts.
You tell them to descend. You tell them to talk about all the bad stuff.
Exactly. To redeem the modern mind, Freud believed he had to break the laws of Victorian propriety. He had to go down into the filth of the unconscious, the incestuous desires, the violent urges, all the shame. He had to go into the darkness to retrieve the sparks of sanity.
So just as the false messiah goes into the darkness to save the sparks,
the analyst takes the patient down into the id to save the self.
The slide uses a German word here, Heimlichkeit,
which means bringing the hidden into the light. And that is the core mission of both the mystic and the psychoanalyst. It's a radical inversion of how we normally think about healing. You don't climb up to the light, you dig down through the dark to find it.
It makes you see Freud in a completely different light. He's not just a doctor in a suit.
He's a modern, secular version of this mystical heretic. It reframes his entire project. He wasn't just trying to fix nervous cystics. He was trying to heal the human soul by dragging its darkest secrets into the open.
So let's bring it all together. The outro section of the deck, there's a slide, The verdict? Freud is translator.
And it shows a bridge. On one side, you have mysticism, symbolism, depth. On the other side, science, universal, clinical, secular.
And Freud is the keystone, right in the middle.
This is the ultimate takeaway. Freud stands on that bridge. He didn't invent the unconscious mind. That map existed for centuries in Jewish mysticism. What he did, his real genius, was to translate that map so that the modern scientific world could finally read it.
The slide says, he saved these insights from the ghetto of theology and gave them to the world as psychology.
And if he hadn't done that, those insights might have just stayed locked away in ancient texts, only accessible to a handful of religious scholars. By putting them in a lab coat, he made them universal.
He gave us a language to talk about our inner lives that didn't require belief in God.
Right. And the final slide is just called Legacy. It shows a Rorschach ink blot, but if you look closely, the blot forms the shape of the Kabbalistic tree of life.
And the caption reads, understanding these roots does not diminish Freud's science. It deepens it.
I think that's a really important note to end on. This isn't about saying psychoanalysis is fake or just magic. It's saying that science often grows out of pre-scientific wisdom. Freud was a bridge builder.
He connected that ancient intuition about the soul with the modern demand for evidence.
And it makes you look at that first graph completely differently. That spike wasn't an explosion from nothing.
It was a dam breaking. All that ancient pressure finally finding a release valve into the 20th century.
Which leaves us with a really big, lingering question. If psychoanalysis is, at its root, a secularized form of mysticism.
Right. What else is?
Exactly. What other modern sciences or deeply held secular beliefs are actually just ancient religious concepts wearing a lab coat?
What else are we translating without even realizing it?
A fantastic question.
That is a thought that will definitely keep me up tonight. We've unpacked the mystery of the two Freuds, the hidden motive for survival, and these incredible parallels with Kabbala. It turns out that talking cure might just be the oldest trick in the book. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into Freud's hidden roots.
A pleasure as always. Keep questioning the origins.
See you next time.